Okay. Dare to dream. Your dreams may fulfill your destiny. I was caring for my dad in 1998, who had Alzheimer's disease, and my mother had been caring for him for 8-9 years, and my wife had suggested that I take time to be with my dad, and she would take my mom away and give her a treat of a trip. And so there I was, caring for my dad, who slept through the night, would get up in the morning, hours after me, and I would help him bathe and feed him breakfast, and then he would sit in his chair, lounge back, we would talk for a bit, and he would fall asleep. And he would sleep until lunch. And then I would have his lunch ready, prepared in a blender because he couldn't swallow very well. And then after lunch, and we would talk for a bit, he would go back to his chair, and he would fall asleep. And then later that afternoon, I knew he would wake up about 4 o'clock in time to have a beer, and he and I would play cribbage, and then have dinner, and then it was time to go to bed, and the cycle would repeat. And so very early on, I realized I had these blocks of time, and I rented a bicycle and started riding around Yuma, Arizona in the heat of October, when I had a dream on a bicycle ride of riding my bicycle across the country to fulfill my son's dream of wanting to ride his motorcycle across the country. And it seemed like that would be a good thing to do as I was trying to live the fulfillment of Ron's dreams as well as my own. And this was one of his dreams, to ride his motorcycle. And I wasn't going to ride a motorcycle, I was going to ride my bicycle. And as the week went on and the rides went on, that bicycle ride went from going across the country to circumnavigating to the country, to eventually it became riding through all 50 states and 10 provinces of Canada, celebrating my 60th birthday. And having just joined Rotary and being excited about Rotary and all that it meant to serve other people and services above self and truth and integrity, I wanted to speak to Rotary clubs on the journey. So it became titled 60 Cycle, celebrating my 60th birthday that was 3 years away, and now celebrating my 60th birthday, riding through 50 states and 10 provinces of Canada, that's a total of 60, and visiting 60 Rotary clubs. So now that became my vision, and I worked on that and all the logistics that were connected with how to do this trip, to ride through all 50 states and then across Canada. I could go west to east, and I would start in Hawaii in January. Where else would you want to be in January? But Hawaii is a great place, and I loved Hawaii. I'd been there many, many times on vacation, loved it, and the Big Island was a great place to bicycle ride. And so that became my start, was the 50th state, was begin with the 50th and end with the first in Delaware before riding into Washington, D.C., which is where I wanted to end by Ron's free day. Ron had died on September 22nd, 1989. Now in 2001, I wanted to finish and celebrate in the freedom capital of the world, Washington, D.C. So it seemed like a beautiful vision, and it came together, and I went to Hawaii, and I rode from San Diego to Florida, and had my route all figured out on how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to tell you a couple of stories on this journey that are fun stories to share, and they have points to them is in terms of my destiny and how if you live your dreams, you will fulfill your destiny. So the first story comes when I'd been to Hawaii. I'm San Diego to Florida, taking a month to ride across the country on the southern route, and I'm at this point in Louisiana. I go through Louisiana, and I'm in the deep south, and I'm riding around in Alabama now, and I'm headed to Mobile, Alabama. They don't say Mobile, they say Mobile down south. So I'm headed to Mobile, and I'm riding along on this early morning, and as I'm riding along, this little black hot rod car comes up alongside on this little 2-lane road and comes up right alongside of me, and the window comes down, and I hear this voice, and this cute little blonde lady looks at me and she says, "Missa, you got to get off the road. Don't you know we got a tornado watch going on down here?" I said, Thank you, ma'am. I got to get off the road, a tornado watch. It's dark. I realize, okay, it's dark. They got a tornado coming. So I'm riding like crazy to get to the next place where I can get off the road. And so I get into this little grocery store where I get to the back of the grocery store. They actually have a place where they can make sandwiches in the back, a little cafe there. And they've got a TV there. And I said, can you turn the TV on so I can see what's going on with the tornado and watch that? And I get the story that, this is going to be dangerous. And talking with a couple of ladies there, they tell me that there is a ferry that it goes across to Dolphin Island, and then from Dolphin Island all over to the Gulf, where then you go into Florida, and I bypass all of Mobile, Alabama. And so that sounds like a good thing. And I look up the ferry to see if they're operating. I call them on my cell phone. Yes, they are operating. The ferry leaves at 2:30 that afternoon. I get on my bike and I ride like crazy. I got to make it there by 2:30. Got to make it there by 2:30. I can't remember how many miles it is, but a lot of miles I've got to cover and to get to Dolphin Island. And so now the rains start coming. They start pouring. It starts pouring rain. I've got my raincoat on, and I'm just pedaling as fast as I can through the rain. I finally get to the bridge that goes over onto Dolphin Island. And by the time I get there, the thunder is going, the lightning is coming, and I have been praying, and I have been reciting this 23rd Psalm that I found was an encouragement to me as I would say, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want any other, Lord, but you, Lord." And I continue on that He provides for me green pastures and still waters, and these waters are not all that still, Lord. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. No, I am riding through the valley of the shadow of death as the lightning is coming and the thunder is coming, and they're at the same time. You know what that means? It's right here. The storm is right here. There's not a car on the road. The water is this deep. I'm riding through this water and looking around as I'm praying, yea, though I ride through the valley of the shadow of death, Lord, I will fear no evil. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And I had peace come over me as I'm riding through the valley of the shadow of death. I am right there as all this is happening. And yet I have this inner peace. I have warmth. I should be cold. It's wet. My body is wet. And I just kept writing, and the peace was there, and the storm seemed to still. As I entered Dolphin Island, and I was able to stop at a gas station and get directions to the ferry, I get to the ferry and have to wait a bit and get dried off and get some dry clothes on and get on the ferry and get to the other side. The peace that I had was overwhelming, and I couldn't help but reflect on that moment so many times as I continued on my journey. My next story comes in Bradshaw, West Virginia. I had just ridden through this little town that had a big sign on it that said the name of the town was War, W-A-R, big letters. And so I, stop at a grocery store to get something to eat and a drink, and I'm asking the people, why do they call this town War? Don't you know? The Hatfields and the McCoys? So here I am, where history was the Hatfields and the McCoys. So I leave this town, and shortly after, I get to a little town called Bradshaw, and it's time for me to find a place to stay that night. And so I'm looking for a motel, and I don't see one anywhere as I'm riding through town. And I see a gas station and a phone booth. And I decide I'm going to phone my wife on, guess what? A phone in a phone booth with a card, with a card to use a code to make a long-distance phone call. This was in 2001. I had a cell phone with me, but I went to use the phone in this phone booth. I call my wife and tell her my predicament. I cannot find a motel in this town. I think I'm going to ride up the mountain and pull off and camp in the woods. And she says, honey, I don't think you ought to do that. I think you ought to find a place to stay. And as soon as she says that, I see a policeman walk out of the building right next door toward his car. I said, okay, I'll see what I can do. And I hung up and I walked over, and the policeman was in his car, and I did a rude thing. I walked up next to the car, and he was looking down, and I rapped on the window. And so he opened the door and got out, and we talked, and I shared my story with him of what I was doing and how I needed a place to stay, and I couldn't find a place to stay in Bradshaw. We ain't got no motels in Bradshaw, he says, but give me a few minutes, stay right here, and I'll be right back. And he takes off in his car, and he's gone a bit, and he comes back, and he says, follow me. Okay, so I'm following him on my bicycle, and we only go about 2 blocks down the street, and he pulls in front of City Hall. And he takes me in and introduces me to the city manager, who is Friday night writing payroll checks. And he says to her, this is the man I told you about. And she said, well, you can stay here in our hall tonight. Here I will show you where you can stay. And she takes me in and shows me this big ballroom. You can lay your sleeping bag in here, and here's the kitchen. You can have any food that's in the refrigerator here, and there's the stove if you want to cook it. And here's the men's room and the ladies' room. And you are welcome to spend the night. Will you be gone by 8 o'clock in the morning? I said, yes, I will, ma'am. And she said, okay, fine. Enjoy your peace right here. What a gift of hospitality that happens when we just listen and maybe ask for help. And it's right there, provided for us. Story number 2. Story number 3. I'm now come into Cincinnati, Ohio, where I'd lived for a year. It's the headquarters of the company that I worked for 35 years. I'd been there, 100 times on business trips and had lots of friends there. And I was going to stay there for 4 days before flying home to Seattle from Cincinnati for the memorial service of my friend who had just died on April 2nd when I was in North Carolina. My friend Gene, who died of multiple myeloma, that was the one that I joined Rotary because of Gene 3 years earlier. And his son told me that they were planning the memorial service and gave me the date, April 16th, which was 2 weeks away because his sister was in Europe and they didn't want to disturb she and her husband while they were on vacation. And so they were planning the memorial service for after she got home. I was going to spend some time with friends in Cincinnati, and an ex-leader, I don't say boss, he wasn't a boss, he was a leader and a wonderful one, was having a meeting of all my peers on that Tuesday night and invited me to come and share with them about my bicycle trip and to be able to see about 75, 80 of my colleagues and friends. And so I had made sure that I got there at least a day early for that so that I could attend that event. Now, the point of this story is listening to the inner spirit, listening to that voice and that prompt, like I had in Bradshaw, that I went to stay with a friend, and so I got to the Cincinnati airport, rented a car. I'm going to be there for 4 days, rented a car, and I'll be able to go around town visiting friends and Rotary clubs. And so I get to my friend's house, and I tell her, I need to get some new tires for my bike. I had 3 flat tires that day, which was a good sign that tires were worn. So she said, go to Montgomery Cycle, go out here, turn right, go down 2 miles to the T, turn right, and Montgomery Cycle's about a mile on the right. So I followed her instructions exactly. I get down there. I'm sure I went a mile, and no Montgomery Cycle. I turn around and think, well, Byra must have meant turn left when she said right. Not like her. She's always right. But so I went the opposite direction, and I get up about a mile the other way, and sure enough, there's a bike store with banners out, like a grand opening. And so I pulled in there, and, okay, I can get my tires right here. So I get out of the car, and I'm going to get the bike, and this voice in my head, this little whisper, says, why don't you just go in and check and see if they have your tires? Good idea. So I do. I walk in, walk through the front of the store, walk past 2 gentlemen, get back to the service desk, and ask this young man for my Continental tires and give him the description. He looks it up on his computer. He says, yes, I have 2 of them. I said, good, that's what I need. I'll go out to the car and get my wheels. I'm thinking, I don't need to bring the bike in. I'll go out to the car and get my wheels. So I had taken the wheels off of the bike to get it in the back of the car. So I start to walk out, and he says, I'll go with you. And strange thing, have you ever had a clerk go out to the parking lot to your car with you? I had never had that happen before and haven't had it since. But it's critical to this story. He comes out with me as I open up the boot and get in the back of the trunk to get the wheels out. He looks and says, "Oh, you have a Serrata, the make of my bicycle." And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Do you know that Ben Serrata is in the front of our store?" I said, "No, that's amazing. Let me go meet him." And he said, "Yeah." So he takes my wheels and puts my new tires on while I go talk to Ben Serrata. And so I tell him how happy I was with his bicycle and why I bought it, because it had his name on it, and I knew it would be quality, and how his people had taken care of me. And he asked me questions about my trip and where I'm going, and he said, "Ray, you got to come visit us in New York. When you come across Canada that you're saying, you drop down at Toronto and go across Niagara Falls and come right over to West Glen Falls where we are. And, I'll give you a tour of the factory, introduce you to the guys, show you how we make your bike." And I said, "That sounds like a great idea." And he said, "Before you go, Ray," he said, I just feel like I should tell you this." He said, "Mike here came up and met with me and told me he was opening a bike store and he wanted to sell my bicycles. And we made an agreement, and he said, 'I'll let you know when we're open, and maybe you want to come visit us.'" And he said, "So that, Ray," he said, "well, if that's convenient." So he said, "I was getting ready to make a trip to St. Louis, and I looked at, this is when he was having the grand opening, and I decided, well, I'll fly into Cincinnati and stop in and see Mike and the store." And he said, "I landed a little over an hour ago, and I'm leaving in 2 hours. And I'm just here in this one period of time, and it's kind of coincidental that you're here at this time too." Wow, that is a coincidence extreme. I've learned to call it a God wink. It is an extreme example that also I was blessed immensely when I eventually went and visited Ben Serrata, and he fulfilled his promise. And because I was there and did the route he suggested I come to do, I went nearby to a town I had heard about, and pictures had been sent to me by a friend. Postcards had been sent to me by my grandparents on both sides when they had been to this little town in New York right next to Lake Placid. The name of the town is Ray Brook. Oh my, what a God wink. So now I finish my trip across Canada. I end my trip in Washington, D.C. on September 9th and rent a car and drive to New York, where I've been invited to be on the Today Show for an interview on Monday morning, September 10th. As you know, the world changed on September 11th, 2001, when I was there in New York City. And now, pause. I may need to use my phone. Yeah, I have it in my hand. Put it in my pocket. Oh. Now 9/11 made me think a lot about destiny. Didn't it you? Mine led me to the best chapter and the best years of my life. Stay tuned for the rest of that story. I didn't know my destiny. I was just following my dreams. And I encourage you to follow yours. I just couldn't